It was another huge weekend of official visits for Marcus Freeman and his staff, and all eyes were on top prospects Deuce Knight and Ivan Taylor. Will Notre Dame be able to hold on to their two highest-ranked commits in the class of 2025? More on that coming up next. What's up, and welcome into Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. And today is Tuesday, June 18th, and thank you for getting your day started right here by making this your first listen of the day. I'm your host, Tyler Wojciak. I'm a Notre Dame alum and producer at Fox Sports. And as always, you can watch this show on YouTube or you can listen wherever you get your podcasts. If you are watching along on YouTube, please like the video below and subscribe to the channel. Or if you're listening to the podcast, please rate the show 5 stars, leave a review if you haven't already, and of course, subscribe there as well. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnCollege. Terms and conditions apply. Okay. This past weekend was another hugely important event for Marcus Freeman and his staff. Notre Dame hosted 11 committed prospects as well as 6 uncommitted prospects that are some of the top guys left on their board. And this was over the course of the past week. And now that the dust has settled a little bit, we've had a couple days, I have a couple major takeaways that I want to share with you. And then at the end, I'm actually going to predict how I think Notre Dame is going to close out in their class of 2025. Now, obviously, those predictions are certainly subject to change. We're still about 6 months away, give or take, from the early signing period. But I think we've got a pretty good idea of how things are going to shake out. So I'm prepared to go on record and give these predictions. And I also understand that we could look back at these a couple months from now and be like, oof, that really did not turn out that well. And maybe we were not as in tune with what some of these prospects were thinking as we currently think. But let's begin with the 2 most important prospects who are on campus this weekend, who also happen to be the 2 highest ranked and most important commitments, at least in my opinion, in the class of 2025 for Notre Dame. That is 4-star quarterback Deuce Knight and 4-star safety Ivan Taylor. Even though they're both currently committed to Notre Dame, the Irish are in an absolute battle to hold on to both of these guys. So if you listen to the show or you consume really any type of Notre Dame media content that's out there, odds are you know the Deuce Knight story by now. Deuce Knight is the star of this class for Notre Dame. He is a high 4-star quarterback. Not only is he the star, he's really been the leader of this class ever since he committed way back in September of 2023. He has elite traits. He's 6'4". He's right around 200 pounds. He has a 40-plus inch vertical, and apparently he runs a 4.4, maybe 4.3 40-yard dash, depending on who you ask. This Notre Dame staff made him a priority a really long time ago, and his stock continues to rise because Deuce Knight is just so talented and his potential is through the roof. Now, Deuce Knight is also from Lucedale, Mississippi. Lucedale, Mississippi is not necessarily a recruiting hotbed for Notre Dame, or certainly has not been in the past, history of the school. Lucedale is a small town, and Knight loves his small town. And last fall, Deuce Knight opted to leave home to play for a bigger program in Tennessee, but during his junior season, Knight left the team during the season and decided to return home, partially because he was homesick and that transfer did not really work out quite like he had hoped. This is not a criticism at all. If I were him, I would have really struggled moving away from home during high school, so I'm certainly not blaming him, but I do think it's noteworthy to bring up whenever we discuss Knight and his recruitment. Since the moment that Deuce Knight committed to Notre Dame, he has said and done all the right things that you would want to hear or see out of a committed prospect. He's constantly wearing Notre Dame gear. He's the biggest recruiter in the class, and he's extremely active on social media, hyping up Notre Dame, tweeting or posting at other recruits and trying to get them to go to Notre Dame. He is very, very involved in that process, and it is truly great to see. And yet, there are some legitimate concerns that Deuce Knight might decide to stay close to home and flip to Ole Miss. There was a point in time where people thought Alabama was in the mix for that as well because Knight's family and Kalen DeBoer have a relationship that dates back to Knight's older brother. But now Alabama has a quarterback commit in this class, and it looks like that has come and gone. However, Ole Miss is a legitimate threat. And whether you want to believe it or not, I believe that the threat is real. Tom Loy from 24/7 Sports has reported it. Loy is one of the most trusted sources for college football recruiting, especially Notre Dame recruiting. Josh Pate, a national college football analyst, has spoken about it as well. Pate said that there are people at Ole Miss who are very confident that they're going to flip him, and typically quarterbacks who are from Mississippi, or really any top prospects from Mississippi, tend to stay in state. But even Pate said that he thinks that in the end, Knight is going to stick with Notre Dame. that's something that I think is key here. All of these people still think that Knight is going to stick with Notre Dame, but we also have to recognize that, hey, he's from Mississippi. Ole Miss really wants him. They're doing everything they possibly can to flip him. So there are some legitimate concerns that he might flip. Quick aside, and I don't think any of the incredibly intelligent viewers and listeners of this program would ever do that, but lately I've been seeing some members of the Notre Dame fan base get so mad at Tom Loy or literally anyone for even suggesting that Knight might consider flipping to Ole Miss. They're not even saying that he will. They're just recognizing that they're a threat. And all of a sudden, you got all these people in there mentioned saying, you're an idiot. That's never going to happen. Slow news day, all this stuff. Like, relax. It is their job to report what they are hearing from credible sources. And I think both Loy and Pate have certainly generated enough credibility that when they say things like that, they're not just making it up out of thin air. But yet some fans treat it like that because they don't necessarily love the information that's being reported. Again, I know that people listening and watching this show would never do it, but I've been seeing that a lot lately, and it's really frustrating me. So just wanted to get that out there. Now let's get back to the real point of this, because even though there are some concerns that Knight might flip, Knight was on campus this past weekend, and I can't even count how many times he's been on campus ever since he committed. It seems like he's there every other weekend, and that is a really great sign, because as long as he continues to visit Notre Dame, spend time with coaching staff and the other commitments, it is way more likely that he is going to stay at Notre Dame. All that being said, Notre Dame is still going to have to battle for him until the very end, but I feel really good about Knight's status with Notre Dame, especially now that he was there on campus yet again. And even though that Deuce Knight is the clear star of this class, he's the quarterback, he's really highly ranked, safety Ivan Taylor is actually the highest rated prospect according to the 24/7 Sports Composite, and he was also on campus this past weekend, and by all accounts there, it seemed like his visit went really well. But this visit was especially important because, you think back to a couple weeks ago, I don't think Taylor was on anyone's radar as a potential flip. Then, seemingly out of nowhere, at least to the fan base, Taylor decided to visit Alabama last weekend and made it known that he plans to visit Michigan this upcoming weekend. So now everything feels like it's up in the air. But the timing of this visit really worked out well for Notre Dame, because not only were they able to get him on campus as soon as this uncertainty, for lack of a better term, started to come about, it was also important that Deuce Knight was there as well, because, as I said, Deuce Knight is the leader of this class. And in talking to Kevin Sinclair from Irish Illustrated, Deuce Knight was with Ivan Taylor a lot during this trip, and Knight was doing everything he could to recruit Taylor to stay at Notre Dame. He was a big part of that visit. Deuce Knight actually posted this video of Ivan Taylor during his photo shoot and said, #he's not leaving, which I thought that was fun. And that's just the kind of guy that Deuce Knight is. He really wants to have everything out there out in the open about Notre Dame, and he just wants to keep pumping up the Irish. I also thought that the picture that Ivan Taylor took with his dad, Ike Taylor, the former Steeler great, as well as current commits Elijah Burris and Jerome Bettis Jr., was absolutely awesome. All three of their dads played for the Steelers. They all made the trip for this weekend, and they took a really cool picture that's been making the rounds on social media. If you haven't seen it yet, go check it out. It was really, really cool. After the visit was over, Taylor spoke about his visit, and it seemed like he really enjoyed it. Matt Freeman from Irish Sports Daily had a great piece up about his conversation with Ivan Taylor. I would encourage everyone who is listening to the show to go check that out, because there's some really great stuff in there. But in that article, it did seem that Taylor made it clear that he has not made a final call about anything and that he still plans to take his official visits. To me, that means that his recruitment is still very much open, even though he's currently committed to Notre Dame. The fact that he's committed to Notre Dame is important. It doesn't mean nothing, but clearly not all commitments are looked at the same. And I know that there's been a lot of talk about Marcus Freeman's official visit policy, but I'm sure that Marcus Freeman is fully aware that Taylor is going to be taking these official visits, and it doesn't seem like Notre Dame is willing to back off of him at any point. As is the case in a lot of circumstances in life, different strokes for different folks, and different rules apply to different people. And in this case, different rules apply to the highest rated prospect in the class, in Ivan Taylor. Notre Dame is going to allow him to take these visits, and they're going to, let this go. They're going to keep recruiting him and still fighting, because they recognize that he is so important to this class. I also think that in Deuce Knight's case, his commitment is a little bit different than Ivan Taylor's, because, with Knight, the people that are recruiting him, the people on Ole Miss's staff, they are from his area. They are not going to let up, and the coaching staff recognizes that. From what Knight said to a couple of reporters that were out there, it doesn't seem like the coaching staff is really asking him about that much, whereas with Taylor, they really had to sit him down and say, hey, what's going on here? Where do we stand? So I think that level of transparency is really important, and frankly, this is what happens when you're dealing with the top prospects in the entire country. Opposing coaches are just not going to let up. They see the talent that Notre Dame sees, and this is the cost of doing business at the top, whether fans like it or not. I've made the analogy before that getting a commitment from one of the top prospects in the country is like having a really attractive girlfriend. She might be your girlfriend, but that's not going to stop other guys from checking her out or approaching her when you're not around. It's unfortunate, but that's just the way the world works, and that is the way the world works in recruiting. I understand why fans are concerned about Taylor and Knight, given how Notre Dame has gotten burnt in the past by some of these top-level guys. But if they stop recruiting these guys entirely, then they're never going to get where they want to go. So this is what they have to do. This is, unfortunately, what they have to deal with. But still, I feel really good about where Notre Dame stands with Deuce Knight. As long as he continues to do and say everything that he's been doing, I have no reason that he's going to actually flip from Notre Dame to Ole Miss, but the Taylor situation is definitely concerning. As long as he continues to take official visits, to me, that means he's an uncommitted prospect and he is not fully committed to Notre Dame. But overall, with both of these guys getting on campus at this time in their recruitments, I think that this was a big step in the right direction for the staff as they work to keep these guys. They're just going to have to keep that going for the next several months to keep them, and then hopefully come December after the early signing day, we can all breathe a sigh of relief. Okay, the Irish also hosted 4 of their top wide receiver prospects left on the board. So is Notre Dame still the favorite to land 5-star Derek Meadows? Find out right after this. Today's episode is sponsored by LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs is the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. Speaking from my own experience, I know that whenever we're looking to make a new hire, we use LinkedIn to help find the perfect new team member, and it's so easy because they do the heavy lifting. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. They've got a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. It's why owners rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. Post your job for free, LinkedIn.com/LockedOnCollege. That's LinkedIn.com/LockedOnCollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. If you're an everyday listener of this show, you know that I look at the wide receiver position as the biggest weakness in the class of 2025 right now for Notre Dame. At this point, they only have 2 commitments, and they're both 3-stars, Elijah Burris and Jerome Bettis Jr. Neither one of them is ranked in the top 500 nationally, according to the 24/7 Sports Composite. And even though there are certainly some of you out there who think that rankings don't matter and that Burris and Bettis Jr. are probably going to be, as good as their dads were, it's simply not good enough. That is not good enough for Notre Dame, especially at a position of weakness, or at least a position that has been a weakness for Notre Dame for the past several years. They need to recruit that position better. Now, they did have to have a coaching change in this past offseason, going from Chancey Stuckey, who, for all his faults, was a really good recruiter. He's a big reason why Notre Dame was able to get Jaden Greathouse on campus, as well as Rico Flores. But then again, he did add Braylon James, and that was clearly a miss for him and the staff. But Mike Brown has really hit the ground running ever since he became the wide receivers coach after he left Cincinnati. The good thing, at least the way I look at it, is that the staff clearly recognizes that the 2 guys that they have right now, just the 2 of them, are not good enough. They need more guys in this class. And in the past week, they hosted 4 of their top wide receiver targets left on the board. 5-star Derek Meadows. He's the headliner. Notre Dame has been in on him forever. He was on campus this past weekend. Huge visit for him. They also had 4-stars John Anthony Hall, Dylan Robinson, and Tanuk Hines on campus over the course of the past week. To me, if Notre Dame lands a commitment from Derek Meadows, that changes this entire class because Notre Dame has not had wide receiver commitment like Derek Meadows in a really long time. Meadows, frankly, don't grow on trees. Not guys with his body type. He's a 5-star in 24/7. He's 6'5", 200 pounds, and he is the perfect boundary receiver. And that is a position that Notre Dame has really struggled at in recent years. Now, I said that Notre Dame was on him early, and then lately, over the past several months, a lot of other big-time programs have gotten in on the action. Meadows is considering a few SEC schools. He's already taken official visits to Georgia and Michigan, and he has 2 more visits scheduled at LSU and Alabama. Those are some heavy hitters. But I feel like Notre Dame really knocked it out of the park with this last visit, and they are still the favorite for Meadows' services in college. I think the fact that Notre Dame was in on him very early is very, very important in this recruitment, and it sounds like Meadows is ready to make a decision in September. So things are still going well. We're going to have to obviously monitor Meadows' visits to Alabama and LSU, because the one thing that Meadows said, I believe this was to Matt Freeman from Irish Sports Daily, just want to make sure that I have that credit correct. The most important thing for him, where can he get developed? Notre Dame hasn't had a great track record of wide receiver development in recent years, and one school who certainly does is LSU, and he is going to be visiting LSU here in a couple weeks. So that is a concern, but I still feel like Notre Dame is the leader for Meadows, and that is absolutely massive for this class and really the offense going forward. Okay, now let's look at John Anthony Hall. He was on campus last week, and he is just a very interesting prospect to me. He's a 4-star wide receiver, and he's out of Fishers, Indiana, so he's not far from the Notre Dame campus, but Notre Dame did not decide to offer him until this month. So that, to me, is a bit of a red flag, because we know that Notre Dame likes to recruit guys early. They like to get after early in the process. And, there's always a chance that some guys develop later on, and that's a potential con in Notre Dame's recruiting strategy, is that they get the evaluation wrong early. But so far, they have shown with guys like Deuce Knight and Derek Meadows, guys who they were on early, ended up blossoming into stars. So even though they weren't really recruiting John Anthony Hall that early, even though he's from Indiana, it's still possible that he has developed into a much better prospect. But the recruiting rankings are all over the place with him. If you look at 24/7, he's just outside the top 50. But if you look at other recruiting sites, he's not even the top 35 receivers in this class. So really, it's hard to make sense of where or how he is going to project once he gets to the college level. You look at his offer list and the schools that he's highly considering, it's Purdue, IU, and Stanford. So you would think that once Notre Dame offered him, and the fact that he made it such a priority to get on campus as soon as possible, Notre Dame should be in good shape with John Anthony Hall, and it sounded like his visit went well last week. If you want to get a little bit more insight into the type of player that Hall is, last season he caught 69 passes during his junior year, had just over 1,000 receiving yards and 6 touchdowns. So he's a productive player, but still, I am a little bit concerned by the fact that Notre Dame waited this long to offer him, knowing that they'd probably be in the lead for him very early, considering the fact that he's in state. But still, I think the fact that he's continuing to rise up the rankings is a positive sign. We're just going to have to see how he does his senior year. I think that's going to go a long way in determining, or at least maybe not determining, but projecting what he's going to do once he gets to college. Okay, another receiver that Notre Dame had, Dylan Robinson. Robinson's a 4-star out of Laverne, California. He's right around a top 10 wide receiver in this class. He's 6'3", 190 pounds, and he moves really well. Now, Robinson plays both sides of the ball, like most top recruits in high school, but a lot of schools really like Robinson at defensive back. Notre Dame wants him at wide receiver. They see his speed, and they think that he would be a great deep threat in this offense. Last year, he only caught 22 receptions for 514 yards and 6 touchdowns, but again, he was a force on the defensive side of the ball as well. Based on some of this reporting that's out there, it sounds like Notre Dame is certainly going to be one of the final schools to land him, but whenever you're dealing with a prospect from Southern California, or really just California in general, it's going to be tough sometimes to get those guys to come to Notre Dame. But it seemed like, based on what Robinson said after the visit, Notre Dame did really, really well in this visit. And now, if Notre Dame was sort of on the outside looking in, they've got a very real chance of landing Robinson. And then there's Sanu Kynes. And to be honest with you, I think out of any of these guys, the one who I would say is the most likely to commit to Notre Dame is Sanu Kynes. He's a 3-star wide receiver right now, but I think he's going to really skyrocket up the rankings this year because he plays in Houston, Texas. He plays against 6A competition in Texas, which, as we know, is some of the best high school football in the country, and the dude balls out. He is a really, really productive player when he's on the field. I think part of the reason why he's not ranked as high as some of these other guys is he only played in 6 games last year while he was dealing with an injury. But over the course of the past 2 seasons, he's racked up 85 receptions for just under 1,400 yards receiving and 13 touchdowns. He's very, very fast. He ran a 10.45 100-meter dash. Really, really good for a guy with his size. He's listed as 6'1", looks like 6 foot to me, and probably around 165 pounds, which, for a receiver, that's pretty thin. But I think, he's in high school. He's going to bulk up. Again, he's been injured too, so that's going to impact what he's able to do in the weight room. I think that what Notre Dame did with Tunic Hines and his parents this past weekend was really, really important, and I would not be surprised if Notre Dame got a verbal commitment from him in the near future. I really, really like him as a prospect, and I feel like if they're able to land him, there's a bunch of different things that he can do for the offense because he plays for a college-style offense right now, and once he gets to college, I think that transition is going to be more smooth compared to the other guys. It's kind of like Jaden Greathouse. When he got to college, Greathouse was a little bit more physically ready to go, but he had come from a system and Austin Westlake, where he really knew how to play. He knew all the different positions out there, and that's a big reason why he was able to get on the field so much as a true freshman. Notre Dame needs to land at least two of these guys. Absolutely have to. I told you, I think they're going to land Hines. I still think they're the favorite for Meadows, so I feel good about Notre Dame's position here. If they land three, and I think they could, I think, they're probably going to have to move some things around with the scholarship numbers, not just this year, but years down the road as well. That would be a really good haul. They'd have 5 wide receivers in this class, which is a lot, but also there's a chance that Jerome Bettis Jr. could switch over to the defensive side of the ball once he gets to college. Either way, just keep taking good players, especially at a position where you have not had that many good players in the past. So this is a very, very important weekend for Notre Dame and their wide receivers, and by all accounts, it went really well, which is a very big deal for the future of the Notre Dame offense. So how is Notre Dame going to close out this class of 2025? My predictions and more right after this. Today's episode is also sponsored by FanDuel. Summertime means baseball, the NBA Finals, and more, and you can bet it all on FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 you can use to bet everything from the Finals MVP to who's going to hit one out of the park. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and add a big win to your summer bucket list. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Before we get to my predictions, there's a couple other commitments that Notre Dame had on campus over the course of the past week. And even though there's not these big takeaways because these guys are committed and they're all locked in and ready to go, I do want to mention it. Offensive tackles Owen Straybig, Will Black, and Matty Augustine made the trip, as well as running back Justin Thurman, defensive end Christopher Burgess Jr., defensive tackle Davion Dixon, and safety Ethan Long. Again, not a ton to report there, other than that it sounded like the visits went really well, and the more time that these guys spend together, I think the camaraderie builds for that group, and it bodes well for the entire class of 2025. One thing that Notre Dame has absolutely nailed over the course of the past years, really ever since Marcus Freeman became the head coach, is valuing the chemistry between the class as a whole, getting those guys committed early, getting them on campus together, allowing them to spend time with one another before they get to Notre Dame. It just means a lot to those guys, and I think it helps make the transition a lot easier once they get to campus, because once they get there, they're already friends with all the guys in the class, and they've spent a bunch of time together, so it's not all brand new once they get there. Again, it's a small thing. It's not going to be the big major headline for this show, but I do think that it's important, and that's why I wanted to mention it. One other recruit I wanted to mention who was on campus was 4-star safety Jaden Blair. Blair's name has come up a lot lately. I've talked a lot about him on this show. He's a 4-star safety. He's 6'4", 190 pounds, and I'm not saying he's Kyle Hamilton, but he's the closest thing in terms of the physical frame to Kyle Hamilton that we have seen since Hamilton left. Now, there was a point in time where it seemed like Penn State was the leader for Blair, but Notre Dame has had a real resurgence as of late, and I think that his visit to Notre Dame last week was huge. Now, Blair is knocking out these visits at a rapid pace, but when he was on campus last week, even though he was only there for a day, it went really well. And something that I thought was really interesting in talking to a friend of the program, Kevin Sinclair, is that when Jaden Blair was on campus, his family spoke with Kyle Hamilton's dad, Derek Hamilton. So the fact that Notre Dame has the parent of one of their best players in the past 2 decades really talk to other recruits, especially a recruit at a position that Kyle Hamilton absolutely dominated at, was really important. And also with Kyle Hamilton and all the success that he's having in the NFL, I think it's great to see the family continue to be a part of the Notre Dame community and give back. That is a really, really cool thing, and I think it means a lot with these recruits. And now that Ivan Taylor's status is up in the air, Blair's recruitment becomes all that more important because, if Taylor stays, Blair would be a luxury. Notre Dame already has a great class of defensive backs. They've got really, really talented cornerbacks in Dallas Golden and Mark Zachary. Also, don't sleep on Creed Thomas, another talented cornerback prospect in this class as well. Ivan Taylor, top-ranked prospect in the class. They land him. He's going to be a stud for years at Notre Dame. Then they have 3-star safety Ethan Long, kind of forgotten about, but still has some potential there as more of a developmental prospect. Then if they were to add Blair, that's 3 really talented safeties and 3 really good three really good cornerbacks, which would make it probably the best class of defensive backs that Notre Dame has had in a really, really long time. But if Taylor leaves, now it's like, okay, well, now we only have 1 safety, and it's a developmental prospect. And you look at the class last year, those are 3 developmental prospects as well. Of them, maybe Tay Johnson, maybe he can get on the field a little bit sooner, but still, the urgency is real when it comes to Notre Dame at safety recruiting. So that visit was really important for Jaden Blair, and it does seem like Notre Dame is in a great spot to land him. So how is Notre Dame going to finish out this class? Here are my predictions as of today. Right off the top, I think Deuce Knight is going to stay with Notre Dame. Again, until he gives us any reason to think otherwise, that he's wavering at all in his decision. If he starts quieting down on social media, if he starts wearing Ole Miss gear, then I'll be like, okay, he's going to flip. But right now, I feel like Notre Dame and their staff is approaching this perfectly. And when it's all said and done, Knight is going to go to Notre Dame, and he's going to have a great career for the Irish. So I feel really good about that. Now, at wide receiver, I think it's going to be Derek Meadows and Tadeusz Hines. Maybe John Anthony Hall, depending on the timing. I'm not really sure how the Notre Dame coaching staff is going to approach that, because Derek Meadows can wait until the very last day of this cycle. If he wants to commit to Notre Dame is absolutely going to take him, and they will figure out the roster numbers later. Tadeusz Hines, I think, is going to recruit a little bit earlier than some of the other guys, and Notre Dame is going to be happy to have him. Now with Dylan Robinson, John Anthony Hall, it might be a situation where it's like, hey, if one goes, then the other is kind of, sorry, we're going to have to move on from you, because they're going to wait on Derek Meadows. It's a risky play, but again, sometimes this is what happens. Now, if Dylan Robinson wants to commit, I think they'll probably just take him immediately. Again, this is just my hunch and my prediction here, but I do think that it's going to be Meadows and Hines and one more guy, either Dylan Robinson or John Anthony Hall. And my guess is it's probably going to be John Anthony Hall, just given the fact that he's from Indiana and the sense of urgency he had in getting on campus, and also taking a look at other schools that he's considering. Again, Purdue, IU, Stanford, Notre Dame is clearly above those guys. So if Notre Dame is willing to take him, John Anthony Hall would be a very welcome member in this class. All right, let's flip it over to the defensive side of the ball. I think Notre Dame is going to land Madden Framo. There was a chance, or at least it felt like they might land him immediately coming off of his official visit. I think that he's going to take the rest of his visits, and then still in the end, I like him to end up with the Irish. Now, then there's Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng. I really, really want Notre Dame to land him. The brother of Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, one of my favorite Notre Dame players in recent memory. This dude is an absolute stud. And if Notre Dame was able to land Madden Framo and Woo's brother, that'd be an unbelievable haul at linebacker. But I just have this bad feeling that Ohio State is going to land him. He was just at Ohio State this past weekend. He was calling it, like he said that they have the best traditions in college football. He said that to the guys at 11 Warriors over there. And the thing that concerns me the most about Ohio State, one, their NIL operation. They're throwing out bags right now like no one's business. And two, they have just developed more guys at linebacker in recent years. They've had better defenses. Again, not just looking at last year, just looking at a whole what Ohio State has produced at the linebacker position. I just have a feeling that in the end, that might be the reason why Owusu-Boateng ends up at Ohio State. Again, Notre Dame has obviously developed some really good linebackers, including his brother, including Jalen Smith, including Manti Te'o. Notre Dame has certainly done well at the linebacker position in recent years, but I do think in the end, just Ohio State, what they've been able to do lately, also the fact that they're probably poised to have a phenomenal season. They're the favorite right now to win the national championship, and also with the understanding that I think he's going to take his recruitment into September, potentially even further. I just have a bad feeling that Ohio State is going to end up with him. It's going to make me sick because they've won a couple big recruitments over Notre Dame in the past few years. But I hope I'm wrong. This is just my hunch. Again, we're going to revisit this later on in the cycle. Then at safety, I think Notre Dame's going to get Jaden Blair. I really do. I think they're going to get him. I feel like Notre Dame has made some really impressive strides with him over the past few weeks, and I do think that in the end, Jaden Blair is going to be Irish. But the bad news is I think Ivan Taylor flips. Now, I can't, this is, again, just me reading the tea leaves, and even though the visit went really well by all accounts, I don't like that he visited Notre Dame and he didn't shut down everything. Still, his options are open. He's going to visit Michigan this upcoming weekend, and it sounds like he wants to get to Florida as well. The fact that he's been committed to Notre Dame this long, and now all of a sudden he's reopening his recruitment, and he's saying that he's not ready to make a final call yet, I just have a bad hunch about that. Again, I hope I'm wrong. about this one. And there's still a very good chance that Notre Dame is able to keep him. But usually when this stuff happens, usually when you have a top-rated guy like this who's committed for a while, and then they're like, you know what, now all of a sudden I'm going to start making official visits, rarely does that team who that player is committed to end up holding on. But it has happened before. It could very well happen with Ivan Taylor here. But that is just sort of how I'm feeling today. Again, this is all subject to change, and losing Taylor would certainly sting. But if Notre Dame is able to close in this order, if they end up getting Derek Meadows, Sanu Kynes, Man Framo, and Shane Blair, it'd still be a really solid class. If they're able to keep Taylor, if they're able to land Owusu Boateng, and they get 3 of those wide receivers I was talking about earlier, then we're talking about an absolutely elite class. So there's a lot more recruiting coverage coming your way over the course of these next few months. There are so many more things that are going to happen, and I'm really excited about it. Notre Dame is in great shape, and even though there's a couple guys who are like, man, I don't know if they're going to end up with the Irish, this is part of it, man. It's fun. Maybe not always. Maybe not when a guy decommits, but I do enjoy talking about it on this show, and I have a really good feeling that Notre Dame is going to land in a really strong way with this class. But that is a wrap for today's episode. Thanks again for making Locked On Irish your first listen of the day. This week, we are back to the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday release schedule. Tomorrow, I'm going to break down the freshmen I am most excited to watch this season. Then on Thursday, I'm planning on having recruiting analyst Eric Thomas from Irish Illustrated back on the show to recap this very eventful month of recruiting for Notre Dame. So really looking forward to that. Remember to subscribe to the show on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. And I will see you tomorrow, same time, same place.